And I'd like to welcome to the program drummer, percussionist, and composer Michael Waldrop. Michael Waldrop is a professor of percussion at Eastern Washington University. He's performed with a wide variety of musicians, including Della Reese, Randy Brecker, Maureen McGovern, Marvin Stamm, Aliane Elias, Slide Hampton, Nelson Riddle Orchestra, Aerto. And there's information about Michael Waldrop at his website, michaelwaldrop.net, MichaelWaldrop.net. How come .net?
.com wasn't available, and I actually recently just that domain became available. So right now it's .com too. So I have both of those domains. So
okay, I had the same problem. Kenfield.com was a door store in the UK, so I had to take kenfield.org. Anyway, welcome to the program, Michael. Nice to be speaking with you.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And we're going to speak mostly, but not exclusively, about your new release time frames. It's out on the Origin, is it Origin Classical label? Is that what it's called? Origin Classical?
Yeah, it is.
And just recently out April 16th, 2021. So congratulations on that release. Very nice release indeed. And we're going to hear a couple of tracks from it. But first, I want to just talk to you a little bit about your own background personally as a percussionist, as a drummer. You're very influenced. You perform a lot, at least on this release, on the marimba, which has African roots. How did that come about? What's your well, tell us a little bit about the marimba and about its African roots.
Well, the marimba has a lot of antecedents, and Africa being one of the main ones. They're called the name marimba. Some people believe has African origins. Mm-hmm. In West Africa, they play a lot of different versions or keyboard percussion instruments made out of wood. Mm-hmm. The gyil, G-Y-I-L, mm-hmm. Is one of the instruments associated with West Africa, still played, and they differ from the Western marimba in that they're not tuned to equal tempered tuning or chromatic scales, mm-hmm. often tuned to pentatonics or slight variations on pentatonics. And the other instrument is called the balafon, B-A-L-A-F-O-N. Mm-hmm. You mentioned I play different things. My education is both in classical and jazz. I have a master's degree in jazz studies. So anyone who plays jazz music has to reckon with the African roots of jazz.
Sure.
And to me, that instrument sounds very authentic with that kind of music. So most of my compositions for the marimba, in fact, all of them have rhythmic elements of African music and rhythmic elements of jazz. Mm-hmm. So I play a lot of different kinds of music on the marimba. I play Bach transcriptions, contemporary classical pieces. You played one on your show last week, Hollow, which is a contemporary classical marimba piece, but my particular pieces are focused on kind of getting in touch with the African roots of the marimba. Uh-huh. But they're different than African marimba pieces because they're chromatic. I do use equal tempered harmony and all of those elements, but I also add different timbres to it, hand percussion, tuned hand percussion, some electronics, which I feel they're just sounds that I think blend very well with the marimba. All the pieces have pretty much the same instrumental components. The 5 of my marimba pieces.
And so, you're recognizing and respecting the tradition, and then you're taking it into your own place. Is that an accurate representation?
Yeah, there's nowhere else I could take it. I mean,
sure.
I've never been to West Africa, and I would like to visit someday. But a lot of American music is strongly influenced by West African music, whether people know it or not. I mean, rock, jazz, Latin music has those characteristics. So it's kind of my sort of imagining of the meeting of classical marimba, Western classical marimba, as it developed in the United States and now in Europe, a meeting of that with its original setting.
Okay. Well, I have two follow-up questions on that, and you can take either of them, either or both, if you would like. The first one is something as a sax player. It's always kind of interested me, I guess, or I've been curious about the whether a percussionist would use a different approach in playing marimba versus playing vibes. That's one question. There's some very similar instruments to the surface of it, to some of us, but of course they have a very different kind of sound. So I'm curious about your perspective on that. And the second question, again, you can answer either or both, is what are the rhythmic aspects to African music that you've incorporated? Is there a way you can communicate those characteristically rhythmic components in a way that makes sense to, say, the layperson?
I can try and do it. I can sort of play some rhythms and demonstrate that. But to your first question about marimba and vibes, they are similar instruments. I use the same grip when I play them. The main difference is in the vibes is the amount of sustain. When you play a note on the vibes with the damper pedal depressed, it will sustain for 10 or 15 seconds. So it's much more legato, much more lyrical. Because of that sustain, there are some different techniques. You have to use your foot to control the damper pedal, and there are dampening techniques which you wouldn't really use on the marimba, or maybe seldom use. But there's no damper pedal on the marimba, so everything is short on the marimba. If you're going to sustain the marimba, you have to use roll techniques. So I play probably more marimba than I do vibes, but in many ways, vibes is a more flexible instrument. But the character of the marimba it's just a beautiful sound, and the sound of wood is kind of mysterious, as opposed to metal. There's a warmth to the marimba that is unique. So
sure, okay.
And what was the second question again?
About the specific rhythms, African rhythms that you're incorporating, and if that's something you can relate easily to, maybe even to non-musicians.
Yes. So what's really unique about African music is the rhythmic structure. So the overall hierarchical form of the music is not it's not hierarchical, it's more linear. So their compositions don't necessarily have a beginning, middle, and an end, especially an end that returns to the beginning, which is kind of Western composition is based on kind of architectural approach to composition, and African music is linear. It's like it starts and ends sort of the same way. I mean, the metaphor I've heard used by musicologists, it's like African music is like a river that's there, and then when you play it, you get in the river, and then when you stop playing, you get out of the river. But that doesn't mean the river stopped. So it's like the music is kind of always going on, in African music, and I feel that's that was actually the music that first attracted me was pop music, rhythm and blues. It has that element that, the fade out endings of pop music songs that wouldn't happen in classical music.
Right.
They could, or maybe they would occasionally, like they call it niente, but it's for me that approach to music is really appealing. And so the rhythmic elements that are unique about it is multi-rhythmical stuff. So I have like a drum here, and I have two drums here I can sort of play. Like the piece that you played on the show last week is called Dem Dakar, which means to go to Dakar, traveling to Dakar, which is the capital of Senegal. It actually starts with African clave on the right hand of the marimba, so which I'll play on. So that rhythm can be heard two different ways. So I'll play a pulse in 4. It can be heard in 4 and 6 at the same time. Is that clear?
Yeah, that is clear. Mm-hmm.
So it can be heard two different ways in 4 or in 6,
right.
And that creates a hypnotic effect. It's sort of like the who's the sketch Girdle Escher sketch.
Escher, yeah.
Escher sketches where you look at it one way, you see one thing, and then their approach to music is somewhat like that, and
right.
I find it really interesting, fascinating, and in the past 40 years, Western classical composers have recognized that, like minimalists like Steve Reich have given African music proper credit for being sophisticated in that manner.
Yeah.
And so I was influenced by those composers, and I'm still fascinated by African music. So
okay, well,
I'm not, by no means am I an expert in African music. I'm definitely a Western musician. So
yeah, understood. And I'll remind folks that we're speaking with Michael Waldrop, drummer, percussionist, composer. Michael Waldrop, and his website, if you want to learn more about his music and activities, is michaelwaldrop.net or michaelwaldrop.com. You heard it first here. And let's move on to talking a little bit about the new recording. It's called Time Frames, and it's on Origin Classical, a very interesting label. A lot of good stuff has come out of there. I guess the first question I have, or the first thing I want to talk about, is the personnel, but I also want to talk about the recording process, because you recorded this during this past year. During pandemic, I imagine there was a certain amount of isolation recording taking place. But if you could talk about both the personnel and also how you went about recording it, that would be great.
Yeah, the pandemic, I had gotten a sabbatical and a grant from Eastern Washington University, where I teach, to record the CD, and I had gotten both of those before the pandemic hit. So I was planning to do the CD from basically June until the end of the year. And but the pandemic caused a lot of complications. I was initially going to record the first tracks, or a lot of the tracks, in Boston. The producer of the CD, Tim Reppert, is a recording engineer in Boston. He was the head engineer, ran Soundtrack Studios in Boston.
Sure.
Good friend of mine from way back, but they were unable to take people in the studio. So I found a studio here to record marimba tracks, and recorded all of my marimba pieces here. And then I found another studio in Portland later in the fall.
And here, by the way, you are located in
Spokane, Washington.
Spokane, Washington. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, go ahead.
And then I found another studio in Portland that was a really good studio, taking customers. So we recorded 4 of the tracks there, a duo for piano and marimba, which is strictly a classical percussion and classical marimba and piano piece. And then I overdubbed marimba parts on a sonata that was written for me by Jack Cooper. It's sonata for marimba and vibraphone and piano. And we added bass and percussion. So the piano was recorded in Indianapolis. The percussion was recorded in LA. The percussionist Brad Dutz is a really prominent LA studio percussionist, recorded on a lot of soundtracks. If you've ever seen the movie, the TV show The Family Guy, he plays all the percussion in that.
Okay.
But he's a incredibly diverse percussionist and a specialist in Middle Eastern percussion. So on that particular piece, which is called Mediterranean Views, he used a lot of Middle Eastern percussion and did an incredible job. And then we recorded the bass in 2 different places. The bassist was a professor of bass at University of Northern Iowa, Alex Pershunin. He recorded 2 of the tracks on bass, and then another professor colleague of Jack Cooper's at the University of Memphis recorded a bass on the middle movement of the Mediterranean Views. So there was definitely some pandemic induced recording done.
Right.
Yeah.
And did, we're going to listen to a track in just a minute. For those of you who are like, come on, shut up and play some music already. But we'll get to that in a second. But did that approach, I don't know, was it problematic in any way? Or was it, in fact, liberating in any way? There's pros and cons to doing that kind of recording. I've done some of that myself. But what was your perspective on that?
It was both problematic and liberating. And liberating in terms of if you are recording it, all 4 players are recording at the same time. Overdubbing is more difficult. And so we were able to get perfect recordings for each track, or as close to perfect as you can get.
So perfectly isolated from each other, is that one?
Perfectly isolated, so the mixing process was really good, and also the editing process, any timing corrections or pitch corrections, which, that would happen when you're recording together, but just being for the sonata, I actually had to create a tempo map for everything, because the sonata has shifting tempos, retards, accelerandos, and even within pieces that supposedly have a static tempo, I shifted the tempo so sort of replicate what would be a natural human way of playing. So as it intensifies, I increase the BPM. So I spent probably a good week creating the tempo maps for the sonata, which is how that was recorded. So everybody played with my tempo map, and we started with MIDI files and a tempo map, and then we just kind of built it. So percussion was recorded first, bass recorded second, piano third, and then my parts were recorded last.
So when
when
you say you had a tempo map, does that mean people were playing to a click track in some cases? Yeah.
Yes, a click track which they could manipulate. They could turn down or turn up. Sure. I didn't play with the click track, so I had the good fortune of it was done.
Yeah. So
I was playing, with what felt like a real trio behind me.
Sure.
But that was an interesting project. It was kind of like building a construction project.
Yeah. Well, it worked out well. It worked out great. So we're going to listen now to your piece. It's called Fractals, and it's a couple minute piece, a relatively short piece, maybe the shortest piece on the release. But anything you want to say about this piece before we play it?
This is the opening piece on the CD. I use it for that purpose because I thought it was really reflective and kind of mysterious, and would hopefully draw the listener in. It's not too aggressive, and it's very reflective of kind of how I view marimba composition. It's one of the simpler pieces, and this again features Jose Rossi on percussion, who's a alumnus of Weather Report, played with Weather Report and recorded with them, and then Brad Dutz also plays percussion on this. And I'm playing marimba, and the electronic sequence consists of a tuned hand drum playing the bass function and kind of an ethereal synthesizer sound.
Okay, so this is the composition by Michael Waldrop.
Yeah.
It's called Fractals. It's from the release time frames on Origin, released just a little bit ago, April 16th. And again, my guest is Michael Waldrop. And we just heard the composition and recording titled Fractals, again, from the release time frames. And my guest is percussionist and composer Michael Waldrop. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about the next piece that we're going to hear. It's
composition
by Brad. Is it? How do you pronounce his last name again? Dutz?
Dutz.
Dutz. You don't pronounce a Z.
You do. Dutz.
Dutz. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I'll remember that at least for the next 5 minutes. So that's good.
Got a better memory than me.
I've done interviews where I've asked somebody to pronounce their name, and really, literally, minutes later, I get it wrong. So, anyway, the piece is called Tortoise Efficiency, and you got to love that title, right? I mean, how can you not? I have no idea what it refers to, but I will. And if you have any insight, feel free to share that. But I will say that you're playing drum kit on this. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it's pretty intense playing, pretty brilliant playing. Anything else? We'll probably just move right to this. Anything else you want to say about this piece?
As far as the title, Brad's famous for his titles. He's got a lot of his own albums out for chamber music. He's got one album called Nine Gardeners Named Ned. And Brad's a really funny guy. He wrote this piece for me. I have a feeling it's kind of about me because he may consider me sort of tortoise-like because I kind of move slowly, but I'm efficient, I don't play that way, but as a personality, but he's never told me why I named it that. I don't ask. I just think it's funny, so I love his titles. They're creative, so.
Yeah, it's definitely funny. And if it is indeed about you, that's great. But if maybe it's about something else entirely, so we don't know.
He did say he'd seen a documentary about tortoises and how, though they move really slowly, that they're really durable.
Efficient.
Yeah, they're efficient.
They live forever.
Yeah,
you got to be efficient to live as long as they do, right?
Yeah, predators can't attack a tortoise. I mean, it's really invulnerable animal. So
we could learn a lot, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and listen to this piece again. The piece titled "Tortoise Efficiency," and it's I'll just say one more time from the release timeframes released under the leadership of my guest, Michael Waldrop. And we're back with my guest, Michael Waldrop. And what do you have? Do you have big plans for the foreseeable future? Do you have performances? Are you teaching again in person at this point, or?
In the fall, we go back to in-person teaching, so I'm very much looking forward to that. I've been teaching mostly online and learned a lot about that during the process. I am looking to schedule performances at schools, various locales, get back to playing jazz. I'm a jazz drum set player, so I'm looking forward to doing that. And I would mention that I have a couple of other CDs on Origin that are actually big band, just traditional, I shouldn't say traditional, but they're jazz big band albums that I'm very proud of. So
what are the titles of those?
That's one is called Origin Suite, and the first one is called Time Within Itself. And they're collaborations between myself and Jack Cooper, who is the composer of the sonata I mentioned. But Jack's also a really proficient, prolific big band composer. He was the composer in residence for the Berlin Jazz Orchestra, and actually had a critically acclaimed CD of Charles Ives's music for big band. So he kind of took a few steps down arranging my music, but
he might not say that. But I noticed that two of your releases have time in the title. Obviously, music is a time-based art form, so that's kind of obvious. But not every musician names their releases using that word. Is there something you want to say about that?
Yeah. The titles are really similar. I mean, Time Within Itself is another way of describing what a piece of music is. I mean, it's if you play a piece, it's kind of going back into a point in time, you know.
Oh yeah.
And time frames is sort of the same metaphor. I guess I should have been more imaginative with the second title, but that's kind of how I view music. I mean, it's and being a percussionist, rhythm and time is really at the center of how I approach music and hear music.
Yeah.
Everything else I learned after learning to be a drummer when I was young came secondary to me, learning tonality, harmony, and all of those aspects of music. So still at the base of everything is rhythm and time. And so that's kind of why the name.
Yeah. Well, speaking of time, we're out of time. So, so I want to say, really appreciated having the opportunity to speak with you. If people want more information about your work, they can go to your website, michaelwaldrop.net. And keep an eye out for things to come, maybe some touring, whatever, when things open up again, as we all hope they will. And thanks again. You take care and stay good out there in Spokane, Washington.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for playing my music. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's great stuff.